I was 6 when Emma was born. My parents called her their miracle baby after years of trying for a second child. I remember the day they brought her home, how my father's eyes glistened with tears as he cradled her tiny body, how my mother whispered promises into her translucent ears. I stood in the corner of our living room, clutching a crayon drawing I'd made to welcome my sister, feeling both important and somehow invisible. The first year was a blur of midnight cries and endless doctor appointments. Emma had been born with a heart murmur that required constant monitoring. Our refrigerator door disappeared beneath a calendar of specialist visits and medication schedules. I learned to tiptoe around the house during her nap times, to wash my hands before I could touch her, to understand that Emma needs quiet meant I should find somewhere else to play. I tried not to mind. After all, I was the big sister. Mom explained that being older meant being responsible, being understanding. Emma needs extra attention right now, she'd say as she canceled our weekly trip to the library. You're so good at entertaining yourself, Olivia. By the time I turned 8, I could recite Emma's medication schedule from memory. I knew which foods upset her stomach and which stuffed animal she needed to fall asleep. When visitors came, they marveled at how mature I was, how helpful. What a little mother, they'd say, and my parents would beam with pride. No one asked about my school projects or the gymnastics competition I'd placed second in. I told myself, it didn't matter. Emma needed them more. I remember one afternoon in particular. I'd won the spelling bee at school, beating even the 5th graders with the word perseverance. My certificate was folded carefully in my backpack as I rushed home, imagining my mother's smile, maybe even a special dinner celebration. But when I burst through the door, the house was in chaos. Emma had spiked a fever, and my mother was on the phone with the pediatrician, her face tight with worry. Not now, Olivia, she said when I tried to show her my certificate. Emma's sick. Can you grab the children's Tylenol from the bathroom? That night, after Emma's fever broke and the house quieted, I taped my certificate to the wall above my bed myself. My mother never asked what I'd been trying to show her. In 3rd grade, my teacher, Mrs. Morales, pulled me aside after class one day. Olivia, she said, her eyes gentle, you don't always have to be the strong one, you know. I didn't understand what she meant then. I just nodded and hurried to pick up Emma from the kindergarten wing like I did every day. By middle school, the pattern was so established that I rarely questioned it. Emma's health had improved, but her status as the family's focal point remained unchanged. She struggled with reading, dyslexia, we later learned, and my parents poured resources into tutors and special programs. I helped too, sitting with her for hours after I'd finished my own homework, patiently working through sight words and phonics. What would we do without you, Olivia? My mother would say, kissing the top of my head as she rushed past with a load of laundry or Emma's lunch for the next day. I began to take pride in my self-sufficiency. I joined clubs and sports teams that practiced after school so I wouldn't need rides. I learned to cook simple meals, to iron my own clothes, to forge my mother's signature on permission slips when she was too busy to read them. I became the student who never missed an assignment, who teachers could count on to lead group projects, who other parents requested for their children's study groups. Olivia's just naturally independent, my mother told her friends over coffee, as if this trait had sprouted fully formed rather than being carefully cultivated by necessity. On my 14th birthday, my parents planned a small party. Nothing extravagant, just pizza and cake with a few friends. The morning of the celebration, Emma woke up with strep throat. By noon, my party had been canceled, my friends notified not to come. We'll reschedule, my father promised as he headed to the pharmacy for antibiotics. We never did. That evening, as Emma slept upstairs medicated and comfortable, I sat alone at the kitchen table with a single slice of store-bought cake. My mother rushed in to grab a glass of water. I'm sorry about today, honey, she said, squeezing my shoulder. You understand, don't you? Emma needed us. I nodded, because what else could I do? But something shifted in me that night. A quiet recognition that in our family, my needs would always come second. I wasn't just the older sister, I was the afterthought. High school brought new challenges. While Emma continued to require significant attention with her learning disabilities, I threw myself into academics and extracurriculars. I maintained a perfect GPA, became editor of the yearbook, joined the debate team, and worked weekends at a local bookstore. My life expanded beyond our house, beyond the role of supportive sister, and I discovered parts of myself I'd never had space to explore. My parents attended Emma's soccer games without fail but missed my debate tournaments. They hung Emma's C+ English essays on the refrigerator, while my straight A report cards warranted only quick congratulations. When I won a prestigious summer internship at the university research lab, my mother's first question wasn't about the opportunity, but whether I'd still be able to drive Emma to her twice-weekly tutoring sessions. I began to see the harm in this dynamic, not just to me, but to Emma. She was growing up believing she was incapable of independence, that she needed constant support and special accommodation. While my parents' attention had made me self-reliant to a fault, it had made Emma dependent in ways that would eventually hold her back. The summer before my senior year, I overheard my parents discussing Emma's upcoming high school transition. "She'll struggle without Olivia there to help her," my mother fretted. "Maybe Olivia should consider community college for a year or two, just until Emma adjusts?" I stood frozen in the hallway, my college brochures clutched to my chest. For years, I'd dreamed of going to Northwestern, of studying journalism in a place where no one knew me as Emma's helpful big sister. I'd worked for this, sacrificed for this, and now they wanted me to sacrifice that too? That night, I couldn't sleep. As I stared at my ceiling, I realized that the pattern wouldn't stop unless I stopped it. My parents had grown comfortable with our family's imbalance, and breaking it would cause pain, but continuing as we were would eventually destroy both Emma and me in different ways. The next morning, I found my mother alone in the kitchen. "I need to talk to you," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "About college." "I know it seems far away," she began, "but with Emma's needs—" "This isn't about Emma," I interrupted. "This is about me. I'm applying to Northwestern, and if I get in, I'm going. I won't delay my education to ease Emma's transition to high school." My mother's coffee cup froze halfway to her lips. "Olivia, you know your sister needs me?" "No. Mom. What she needs is to learn to stand on her own, just like I had to. What she needs is for you and Dad to believe she can." My mother's eyes filled with tears. "That's not fair. Emma's situation is different." "It is," I agreed. "But the difference isn't that she needs more support. It's that she's gotten it her entire life, while I've been expected to manage on my own." The silence that followed felt like standing on the edge of a cliff. I'd never spoken to my mother this way, never challenged the family narrative so directly. "I love Emma," I continued softly. "But I'm watching you create a future where she'll never believe in herself, where she'll resent you for not preparing her for the real world, and I'm tired of being part of it." "Resent me?" My mother looked genuinely shocked. "Everything I've done has been for her benefit." "Has it? Or has it been easier to focus on her struggles than to give us both what we actually need?" My mother didn't answer, but I saw something in her eyes I'd never seen before. Uncertainty. Maybe even recognition. The conversation didn't solve everything. Change doesn't happen overnight, especially in families where patterns have calcified over years. But it was a beginning. That fall, I applied to Northwestern and 5 other schools, all at least 3 hours from home. My parents didn't mention community college again, though I occasionally caught my mother watching me with a troubled expression, as if seeing me clearly for the first time. Meanwhile, I started deliberately stepping back from my role in Emma's life. Not abandoning her, never that, but creating space for her to face challenges without my automatic intervention. When she struggled with algebra homework, I encouraged her to email her teacher for help instead of solving the problems myself. When she forgot her lunch, I didn't immediately drive it to school. Small things, but significant shifts. Emma resisted at first, accustomed to the safety net I'd always provided. "Why are you being so mean?" she demanded one afternoon after I refused to rewrite an English paper she'd procrastinated on. "I'm not being mean," I explained. "I'm being your sister, not your backup plan." By winter break, Northwestern had offered me a partial scholarship. My father congratulated me with genuine pride. My mother's response was more complicated, happy for me but visibly anxious about what my departure would mean for our family, for Emma. One evening in January, I found my mother sitting alone on the back porch, despite the cold. "Mom? Are you okay?" She patted the space beside her on the step. "Just thinking." I sat, pulling my sweater tighter around me. "I've been watching you with Emma these past few months," she said finally. "The changes you've been making." My heart sank. "Mom, I'm not trying to hurt her." "I know." She placed her hand over mine. "That's not what I meant. I've been watching how she responds when you don't immediately jump in to rescue her. She's stepping up." I nodded, thinking of how Emma had recently organized her own study group for the science test she'd been dreading, how she'd started setting an alarm to remember her medication without reminders. "I think you were right," my mother continued, her voice barely audible above the winter wind, "about the resentment. Not just Emma's potential resentment of me, but—" She trailed off. "Mine of you?" I finished quietly. She nodded, tears gathering. "I never meant to make you feel less important, Olivia. Somewhere along the way, I convinced myself that because you were capable, you needed less from me. I was wrong." I leaned my head against her shoulder, feeling something tight inside me begin to loosen. "I know you were doing your best." "My best wasn't good enough," she whispered. "Not for either of you." We sat in silence for a while, watching our breath form clouds in the cold air. "I can't change the past," she said finally, "but I want to do better. For both my daughters." It wasn't a complete resolution. Those only happen in movies. My mother still sometimes fell into old patterns, still occasionally expected me to sacrifice my needs for Emma's. I still sometimes resented it. But something fundamental had shifted in our understanding of each other, in our willingness to acknowledge the imbalance and work toward change. As my high school graduation approached, I found a letter from Northwestern. In the mail, final confirmation of my scholarship package. As I read it, I felt both elation and a twinge of guilt. Old habits die hard. That evening at dinner, Emma surprised me. "Can I help you pack for college?" she asked. "I've been reading about dorm organization online. Did you know there are special hangers that can hold like 5 shirts in the space of 1? My parents exchanged a look across the table, pride mixed with something like wonder. "That would be great," I told her. "I could use the help." Later, as I was loading the dishwasher, my mother joined me in the kitchen. "I want you to know," she said quietly, "that I'm proud of you. Not just for Northwestern or your grades or any of that. I'm proud of how you've handled all of this. How you spoke up when it would have been easier to stay silent." I nodded, throat tight. "And I promise," she continued, "that I'll make sure Emma knows how to stand on her own before you leave. That's not your responsibility. It's mine. It always was." I thought about all the years I'd spent trying to prevent the inevitable rift. I saw forming between my sister and our mother, how I'd contorted myself to fill gaps, smooth tensions, maintain an impossible balance. I thought about how exhausting it had been, and how futile. "She might still resent you sometimes," I said honestly. "That's part of growing up." My mother smiled sadly. I know, but if she does, it won't be because I didn't prepare her for reality. And it won't be because her sister sacrificed her own life trying to protect her from the truth. I didn't tell her then, but in that moment, I felt something I hadn't expected. Hope. Not just for Emma or for myself, but for all of us. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. Years of patterns don't disappear overnight. But for the first time, I believed we were at least walking in the right direction. As spring turned to summer and my departure for Northwestern drew closer, I watched Emma begin to change. Small things at first, remembering her own appointments, advocating for herself with teachers, then larger ones, telling our mother she wanted to try managing her medication schedule herself, applying for a weekend job at the local library, and I changed too. I learned to ask for help when I needed it, to voice my needs directly instead of silently resenting their dismissal. I learned that independence isn't just about doing everything alone. It's about knowing when to reach out and when to stand firm. One night in July, Emma came to my room and sat on the edge of my bed. "I'm going to miss you when you leave," she said. "I'll miss you too," I replied. "But I'll call all the time, and you can visit." She nodded, picking at a loose thread on my comforter. "You know what's weird? I used to think you had everything figured out. Like nothing was ever hard for you." I laughed. "Trust me, plenty of things were hard. I know that now." She looked up at me, suddenly serious. "Mom told me about how she thinks she relied on you too much to help with me, how she wants to do better." I stayed quiet, waiting. "I never wanted to be a burden," Emma continued. "I just didn't know how to be anything else." "You were never a burden," I said firmly. "You were my sister. You still are." She smiled, a real smile that reached her eyes. "Yeah, but now I'm going to be the kind of sister who can have your back too, not just the other way around." As she left my room that night, I thought about how far we'd all come, and how far we still had to go. The patterns of our childhood wouldn't disappear overnight. There would be backsliding and frustration, old habits reasserting themselves in moments of stress or uncertainty. But for the first time, I wasn't trying to prevent the inevitable. I wasn't positioning myself as the human shield between my sister and reality, between my mother and the consequences of her choices. I was simply being Olivia, sister, daughter, soon-to-be college student, and finally, a priority in my own life. Figuring out the morning I left for Northwestern was crisp and clear, the kind of September day that hints at fall but still holds summer's warmth. My father loaded my suitcases into the trunk while Emma hovered nearby, unnaturally quiet. My mother fluttered around the kitchen, packing snacks for the drive that I hadn't asked for but knew represented her attempt at connection. "Do you have your financial aid paperwork?" she asked for the third time, handing me a bag of homemade trail mix. "Yes, Mom. It's all in my admissions folder." I patted my messenger bag, the worn leather one I'd saved up for by working double shifts at the bookstore last spring. Emma leaned against the counter, fidgeting with her phone case. "I put together a playlist for your drive," she said, not quite meeting my eyes. "It's mostly those indie bands you like, but I added some stuff I thought you might want to try." The gesture caught me off guard. This new version of Emma, thoughtful, initiating, still surprised me sometimes. "Thanks, Em. That's really cool of you." We stood in awkward silence for a moment before she blurted out, "I'm going to be fine, you know. You don't have to worry." Her words pierced something in me. The lingering doubt, the fear that despite all our progress, the old patterns would reassert themselves the moment I drove away. "I know you will," I said, willing myself to believe it. The goodbye itself was brief. My father hugged me hard, whispering, "So proud, kiddo," into my hair. My mother held on a beat too long, her embrace tinged with something that felt like apology. Emma waited until last, then threw her arms around me with unexpected fierceness. "Don't forget me when you're being all intellectual with your college friends," she mumbled. "Not possible," I assured her, throat tight. Who else would send me terrible memes at 3 a.m? As I pulled out of the driveway, I caught one last glimpse in the rearview mirror. My father's arm around my mother's shoulders, Emma standing slightly apart, raising her hand in farewell. I had the strange sensation of watching a photograph develop, the image of my family without me in it, slowly coming into focus. The first weeks at Northwestern passed in a blur of orientation events, syllabus reviews, and awkward dormitory introductions. I threw myself into campus life with the same determined efficiency that had carried me through high school, joining the student newspaper, signing up for a research assistant position with a journalism professor, mapping out study schedules, for midterms that were still months away. My roommate Zoe watched this methodical self-organization with fascination. "Do you ever just, wing it?" she asked one evening, sprawled across her unmade bed while I color-coded my semester calendar. "Not really my thing," I replied, capping my highlighter. Zoe rolled onto her stomach, propping her chin on her hands. "Let me guess, you're the responsible one in your family." The comment hit with unexpected force, like pressing on a bruise I'd forgotten was there. "What makes you say that?" she shrugged. "Just an observation. My sister's the same way. Always 3 steps ahead, never letting anyone take care of her. Classic eldest daughter syndrome." I wanted to object, to explain that my situation was different, more complicated. But the words stuck in my throat. Was I really so transparent? So easily categorized? That night, after Zoe had fallen asleep, I stared at the ceiling and wondered how much of the person I'd become, organized, self-sufficient, resistant to help, was actually me, and how much was just the role I'd been assigned. I called home weekly, conversations that followed a predictable pattern. My mother would recount Emma's latest achievements. She'd joined the school newspaper, started attending a study group. My father would inquire about my classes, and Emma, if she was around, would commandeer the phone to deliver rapid-fire updates about friends I'd never meet and teachers I'd never know. What struck me most was what they didn't ask. No one wanted to know if I was lonely, if I was sleeping enough, if the workload felt overwhelming. They assumed I was handling everything with my usual competence, and I was, mostly. But for the first time, their faith in my self-sufficiency felt less like confidence and more like an expectation I couldn't safely fail. In October, my journalism professor assigned a personal essay titled "The Stories We Don't Tell." The prompt was deliberately open-ended. Uncover a narrative that exists in the negative space of your life, the silences between what's acknowledged. I sat in the library for hours, cursor blinking on a blank document. The stories I didn't tell were so numerous, so deeply embedded in my family's ecosystem, that extracting just one felt impossible. How could I write about being simultaneously essential and invisible? About loving my sister while resenting the space she occupied? About parents who'd forgotten how to see me as anything but capable? "You're overthinking it," Professor Richards told me during office hours, when I confessed my struggle. The best personal essays don't explain. They reveal. Show me a moment where the unspoken became undeniable. That night, I wrote about the birthday party that never happened. Not as an accusation, but as an archaeological dig, carefully brushing away layers to examine what lay beneath. I wrote about sitting alone with store-bought cake, about the precise weight of my mother's hand on my shoulder, about the moment I realized my needs would always come second. I wrote about what it meant to be the child who understood. When I finished, my hands were shaking. It wasn't a polished piece. It rambled in places, circled back on itself, left threads dangling. But it was true in a way I'd never allowed myself to be. Professor Richards read it twice, her expression unreadable. Then she looked up and asked simply, "Have they ever seen this version of you? The one who's angry?" "I'm not angry," I said automatically. She raised an eyebrow. "No?" I thought about it, really thought about it, and realized the feeling simmering beneath my skin for years wasn't just hurt or disappointment. It was rage, banked and controlled but undeniably present. Rage at being overlooked, at having to be the stronger one, at never being allowed to need. "They wouldn't know what to do with my anger," I finally admitted. "Most people don't," she agreed. "But that doesn't mean you should keep swallowing it." The essay earned an A. Professor Richards suggested I submit it to the University Literary magazine, but I declined. Some truths aren't meant for public consumption, at least not yet. Meanwhile, Emma's texts grew more sporadic, shifting from daily updates to occasional check-ins. I told myself this was healthy, a sign she was building her own life rather than shadowing mine. But late at night, I'd scroll through our message history, searching for evidence that she still needed me, that my absence had left some kind of hole. In November, my mother called on a Tuesday night, breaking our Sunday schedule for the first time. "Everything okay?" I asked, immediate alarm tightening my chest. "Fine, fine," she assured me. She paused, and I heard her inhale deeply. "Emma had her first major exam yesterday, biology." "Oh," I said, not understanding the urgency. "How'd she do?" "We don't know yet, but that's not why I'm calling." Another pause. "She studied for it entirely on her own. Wouldn't let me help, wouldn't let me quiz her. Said she needed to figure out her own system." I leaned back against my desk, unsure how to respond. "That sounds good?" "It is," my mother said quickly. "It's just—" Her voice cracked slightly. "She's changing so fast, Olivia. Becoming so independent. And I realized today that I never really let you show me who you were becoming. I was so focused on what you could do, what you could handle, that I missed you." The admission hung between us, fragile and unexpected. "I'm still here, Mom," I said softly. "I know, but I want to do better." She cleared her throat. "So, tell me something real. Not about classes or the newspaper. Something about you, how you're actually doing." I closed my eyes, weighing the risk of honesty against the comfort of our usual script. "I'm struggling," I admitted finally. "Not with the work, but with figuring out who I am when no one needs me to be the responsible one." The silence that followed wasn't awkward or tense, it was attentive, the silence of someone truly listening. "I'm sorry we put that on you," she said finally. "Your father and I. We leaned on your strength so much that we forgot you were just a child too. It wasn't everything. It wasn't a complete reckoning with all the years of imbalance. But it was acknowledgement. And for now, that felt like enough." Thanksgiving brought me home for the first time since leaving. As we pulled into the driveway, I was struck by how unchanged the house looked. Same faded blue paint, same crooked mailbox, same porch swing where I'd spent countless afternoons with homework spread around me. Yet it felt smaller somehow, as if I'd expanded beyond its capacity to contain me. Emma met me at the door, practically vibrating with excitement. "I have so much to show you," she announced, grabbing my hand and pulling me toward her room. "I redecorated, and I have these new sketches, and wait till you see my biology test. I got an A-. I let myself be dragged along, noting the changes in her. A new confidence in her posture, a streak of purple in her hair I knew our mother must have fought against. Her room, once a chaotic jumble of discarded clothes and abandoned hobbies, was now organized with surprising care. Art supplies lined one wall, books stacked neatly on shelves she'd installed herself. "Mom said I could paint the walls," she explained, gesturing to the deep teal that had replaced the childish pink. "Dad?" helped with the first coat, but I did the rest. I sat on the edge of her bed, a strange mix of pride and loss swirling in my chest. "It looks great, Em. Very you." She beamed, then grew serious. "I got your old job, by the way, at Thornfield Books. Ms. Patterson said to tell you hi." "You're working at the bookstore?" I couldn't keep the surprise from my voice. Emma nodded, chin lifting slightly. 20 hours a week. I'm saving up for a camera. I want to take a photography class next semester." I studied her, this new version of my sister who worked and saved and planned, who had ambitions that weren't prompted by our parents, who had somehow, in the 3 months I'd been gone, begun the journey toward becoming her own person. "I'm proud of you," I said simply. Her smile faltered. "You don't think it's weird? Me following in your footsteps?" I reached for her hand. "They're your footsteps now, Em." Dinner that night was both familiar and strange. My father carved the turkey with the same methodical precision. My mother fretted about the dryness of the stuffing. Emma monopolized the conversation with animated stories about her friends. But the underlying current had shifted. My parents asked about my journalism projects, my new friends, the coffee shop I'd discovered near campus where I liked to study. They listened, really listened, to my answers. And when Emma interrupted my story about a difficult professor to share an anecdote about her English teacher, my mother gently redirected her. "Let's hear the rest of Olivia's story first, Emma. Yours sounds exciting too, but we want to make sure we give everyone equal time." Equal time. Such a simple concept, yet one that had eluded our family dynamics for so long. Later, helping with dishes, I caught my mother watching Emma, who was sprawled on the living room floor texting friends, a small frown creasing her forehead. "Something wrong?" I asked, drying a wine glass. She sighed. "I worry about her. She's pushing herself so hard lately. The job, her grades, all these new activities. I'm not sure where it's coming from." I set down the glass carefully. "Have you asked her?" My mother's frown deepened. "She says she wants to be more independent. Like you. But sometimes I wonder if she's trying to prove something." The observation hit uncomfortably close to home. How many of my own achievements had been driven by a desperate need to be seen? To prove my worth in a family where attention was a finite resource? "Maybe she is," I acknowledged. "But maybe that's not entirely bad. She's finding her own way." "I just don't want her to think she has to earn her place," my mother said softly. "The way you did." The admission hung between us, raw and honest. "Then tell her that," I suggested. "Make sure she knows you see her, not just her achievements or her struggles, but her." My mother nodded slowly. "When did you get so wise?" I smiled, bumping her shoulder with mine. "Probably around the time I started raising myself." She winced, but didn't deny it. Progress, I thought. Small but real. That night, Emma crept into my room long after everyone else had gone to bed, just like she used to when we were younger. She curled up at the foot of my bed, knees drawn to her chest, khaki. "I ask you something?" she whispered in the darkness, always. "Do you ever resent me? For how things were when we were growing up?" I inhaled sharply, unprepared for the directness of the question. "Sometimes," I admitted, choosing honesty over comfort. "Not you exactly, but the situation, the imbalance." She was quiet for so long I thought she might have fallen asleep. Then, so softly I almost missed it. "I would have. In your place, I would have hated me." "No," I said firmly, sitting up to face her silhouette. "That's not how it works, Em. None of it was your fault. You didn't create the dynamic. But I benefited from it," she pointed out. "All those years you were taking care of yourself, taking care of me, I was being coddled." The bitterness in her voice surprised me. "You were a child. We both were. But now I feel like I'm playing catch-up," she confessed. Like everyone expects me to be helpless, and I have to work twice as hard to prove I'm not. Mom still tries to do everything for me, check my homework, remind me about medication, pack my lunch. Like I'm still 8 years old. I recognized the frustration in her voice, the struggle against a role assigned rather than chosen. So tell her to stop. I have. But then she gets this hurt look, like I'm rejecting her. Emma pulled at a loose thread on my comforter. Sometimes I think she needs me to need her. That's why I got the job. So I'd have something that's just mine that she can't help with. The insight was startling in its clarity. Emma at 15 had already recognized something it had taken me years to understand. Our mother's caretaking, while born of love, was also about fulfilling her own needs, about feeling necessary. It won't change overnight, I warned her. These patterns run deep. I know, she sighed. But I'm not going to end up resenting her the way. She stopped abruptly. The way I do sometimes? I finished for her. She nodded, barely visible in the darkness. I'm working on that, I told her. And for what it's worth, I think Mom is too. She's trying to see us both more clearly. Emma shifted, uncurling slightly. Does it get easier, being on your own? I thought about my first months at Northwestern. The freedom, the loneliness, the gradual discovery of who I was beyond my family's expectations. It gets different, I said finally. You let go of some things, find others, figure out which parts of yourself are actually yours, and which were just reactions to everything else. That sounds complicated, I laughed softly. It is, but worth it. When she left my room an hour later, I lay awake thinking about our conversation, about Emma's determination not to repeat my experience, about my mother's belated awakening, to the imbalance she'd created, about my own slow journey toward forgiveness. We were all trying, in our imperfect ways, to rewrite a family narrative that had constrained us for too long. It wouldn't be a straight line. There would be backsliding, old habits reasserting themselves, new tensions emerging. But for the first time, I allowed myself to believe that we might eventually find our way to something healthier, that Emma might grow up without the burden of resentment I'd carried, that my mother might learn to see both her daughters clearly, that I might, someday, fully belong to myself. The semester's end brought final exams, late-night study sessions, and the peculiar limbo of a campus preparing for winter break. I found myself both eager to return home and anxious about what awaited me there, whether the small shifts I'd witnessed at Thanksgiving would hold, or whether we'd all slide back into familiar patterns. 2 days before my departure, I received an unexpected email from my mother, subject line simply, "For you." Olivia. I've been thinking about our conversations these past few months and about the things left unsaid for too many years. Words are inadequate, but they're what I have to offer right now. When you were born, I made silent promises about the kind of mother I would be. Patient, attentive, always there when you needed me. For those first years, I believe I kept that promise. You were the center of my world, and I of yours. Then Emma arrived, and everything changed, not just because she needed special care, though that was part of it, but because somewhere along the way, I convinced myself that your self-sufficiency was a sign that you needed less from me, that your strength meant you required less nurturing, less attention, less of the finite resource that was my maternal energy. I was wrong. What I failed to see was that your independence wasn't innate, it was developed out of necessity. You became self-reliant because we gave you no other choice. You took care of yourself because we were too focused elsewhere to notice when you needed care. I'm trying to do better with Emma, to encourage her autonomy without abandoning my support, to see her struggles as opportunities for growth rather than problems I must solve. It's difficult, this recalibration, but necessary. And I'm trying to see you more clearly, too. Not as the perpetually capable daughter who never needed guidance, but as the complex, still evolving woman you are. I want to know that person, not just the role you played in our family. I know these words don't erase the past, but I hope they might help us build a different future. One where both my daughters know, without question, that they are seen, valued, loved not for what they do or how they perform, but simply for who they are. I love you, Olivia. Not despite your anger or your boundaries, but with full acknowledgement of them. They are part of what makes you whole. Mom. I read the email 3 times, tears blurring the screen. It wasn't everything, couldn't be everything, but it was more acknowledgement than I'd ever expected, more honesty than our family typically allowed. Later that night, I called Emma. "Did Mom email you too?" she asked immediately. "She emailed you?" "Yeah. This long thing about seeing me clearly and supporting my independence but still being there when I need her." Emma's voice was a mix of confusion and wonder. "It was weird, but kind of amazing?" I smiled, imagining my mother typing carefully. In the late hours, struggling to find words for emotions our family had spent years avoiding. "She's trying," I said simply. "Yeah." Emma was quiet for a moment. I think we all are. Spring semester brought new classes, a promotion at the university newspaper, and a growing sense that I was finally finding my footing. Not just as a student, but as a person defined by more than family dynamics. I'd started dating someone, a philosophy major named David, who approached life with a thoughtfulness I found both challenging and refreshing. I'd joined a photography club, discovering an unexpected passion for capturing the interplay of light and shadow in urban landscapes. Home, meanwhile, continued its slow transformation. My mother had enrolled in a part-time counseling program at the community college, inspired, she said, by her realization of how much she'd missed in her daughter's emotional lives. My father, initially bewildered by these changes, had gradually begun his own reckoning with the role he'd played, or failed to play, in our family's imbalance. And Emma was blossoming in ways I could hardly keep track of through our weekly video calls. She'd been selected for an advanced art program, started volunteering at an animal shelter, developed a tight circle of friends who seemed to appreciate her quirky humor and newfound confidence. "She's so different," my mother marveled during one of our conversations. "More sure of herself, less afraid of making mistakes." "That's good, isn't it?" I asked, hearing something complicated in her tone. "It is. Of course it is." She hesitated. "But sometimes I feel like she doesn't need me anymore. Like I'm being phased out." The vulnerability in her admission caught me off guard. "Is that how you felt when I left? Like I didn't need you?" "No," she said after a pause. "With you, it was more like I'd trained myself not to see when you did need me. I was so used to you handling everything that I stopped looking for the cracks." Her insight was so precise it almost hurt, naming exactly the dynamic that had shaped our relationship for years. "Mom," I said carefully, "needing you differently isn't the same as not needing you at all." She was quiet for a moment. "I'm learning that. Slowly." When spring break arrived in March, I found myself in the unusual position of actually looking forward to going home. David had invited me to join his family in Boston, but something pulled me toward Minnesota instead. A curiosity about whether the changes in our family could survive prolonged contact, or whether they'd prove to be merely theoretical, collapsing under the weight of old habits. Emma met me at the airport, our father's car keys dangling from her fingers. "Surprise," she grinned. "I got my learner's permit. Dad's letting me practice." I eyed her skeptically. "And Mom agreed to this?" "Eventually." Emma rolled her eyes. "After making me promise to drive 5 miles under the speed limit at all times." The Emma of 6 months ago would have complained bitterly about this restriction. The Emma before me now seemed to recognize it as the compromise it was. A mother learning to let go. A daughter learning to respect legitimate concerns. She drove carefully, both hands on the wheel in the proper positions, shoulders tense with concentration. I fought the urge to offer advice, to take over, to fall back into the pattern of big sister as guide and protector. Instead, I leaned back and asked about her photography class. Her face lit up. "It's amazing, Liv. We're doing this project on perspective. How changing your angle completely transforms what you see." She glanced quickly at me before returning her eyes to the road. "It's making me think about family stuff, you know? How we all saw the same events so differently." The observation was startlingly mature, a reminder that while I'd been away discovering myself, Emma had been doing the same. Home looked different too. The living room had been rearranged, the walls, repainted a warm terracotta that made the space feel both cozier and more sophisticated. My mother's counseling textbooks were stacked on the coffee table alongside a novel my father was reading. Something about medieval history, a new interest he'd developed. Most striking was the wall of photographs, where once there had been only scattered frames, mostly of Emma's milestones. Now there was a carefully arranged collection spanning our entire family history. Me on my first bicycle, Emma losing a tooth, both of us at the lake, squinting into summer sun. My high school graduation, my parents flanking me with genuine smiles. Recent editions showed Emma at her bookstore job, me on Northwestern's campus. "Your mom's idea," my father said, coming up beside me as I studied the display. Said it was time we had a more complete family narrative on our walls. I nodded, speechless at this visual representation of change, of effort, really, of my mother's determination to correct, even in this small way, the imbalances of our past. The week unfolded with a new rhythm, familiar in its basic patterns but altered in significant ways. My mother still cooked elaborate meals, but now Emma helped, learning family recipes with the same focused determination she brought to her photography. My father, retired from teaching since January, had taken up woodworking and showed me the small desk he was building for my dorm room. Most surprising was how they listened when I talked about Northwestern, my classes, my growing interest in investigative journalism. Not the polite half-attention of previous visits, but genuine engagement. Questions that went beyond the surface, reactions that acknowledged both my struggles and successes. "You're doing exactly what you always wanted," my father remarked one evening as we thumbed through the latest issue of the student newspaper, where my article on university housing inequities had made the front page. "Not exactly," I admitted. "I thought I wanted to be an international correspondent, reporting from conflict zones. But lately I've been more drawn to local investigative work, stories that might actually change things in communities that are overlooked." He nodded thoughtfully. "Makes sense, given your experience." "My experience? Being overlooked yourself," he said simply. "You've always had an eye for the forgotten details, the stories people miss." His perception stunned me, not just the insight itself, but the fact that he'd been watching closely enough to form it. That he understood how my past might be shaping my future in ways even I was just beginning to recognize. On Thursday night, my mother asked if I'd help her prepare a special dinner, just the two of us in the kitchen, while Emma helped my father with a project in the garage. "I've been meaning to ask," she said as we chopped vegetables side by side. "Have you thought about summer? Whether you'll come home or stay near campus?" The question was posed casually, but I sensed its weight. In previous years, my summer plans had been an afterthought, assumed rather than discussed. I'd find a job, contribute to household expenses, help with Emma's activities, the responsible daughter playing her assigned role. "I'm not sure yet," I answered honestly. "I've applied for an internship with the Minneapolis Star-Tribune. but I'm also on the wait list for a journalism intensive in DC. She nodded, focusing intently on slicing a carrot into perfectly even pieces. Both sound like amazing opportunities. The DC program is competitive, I warned, not wanting her to get her hopes up about me being closer to home. I probably won't get off the wait list, but you might, she countered, looking up with a small smile. And if you do, you should go, even though we'd love to have you here. The balance in her statement, acknowledgement of her preference alongside clear permission to choose otherwise, felt new and fragile, like ice just beginning to thaw. I've been saving, I told her. If I get the DC spot, I can cover the housing costs. You and Dad wouldn't need to. Olivia, she interrupted gently, your father and I have started a fund for both you and Emma, for education, internships, experiences that matter, things we should have been supporting all along. I set down my knife, caught off guard by the implication that they'd not only recognized the imbalance in their financial support, but had taken concrete steps to address it. You don't have to do that, I said automatically. No, she agreed, meeting my eyes steadily. But we want to. Not because you need rescuing. We both know you're more than capable of making your own way. But because supporting your dreams is what parents are supposed to do, and we're trying to do better at that part. I swallowed hard, unexpected emotion rising in my throat. Thank you. We worked in companionable silence for a while, the rhythm of chopping and stirring creating its own kind of meditation. Then my mother spoke again, her voice softer. Emma told me about your conversation at Thanksgiving, about her fear of resenting me the way. She trailed off, knife poised above a bell pepper. The way I sometimes do? I finished for her, deciding. Honesty was the only path forward. She nodded, resuming her chopping with deliberate focus. Is it very bad? The resentment? The resentment? I considered the question carefully, wanting to honor both her courage in asking and my own complicated truth. It comes and goes, I admitted finally. Sometimes something will trigger it, like seeing Emma get attention or support I never had, and it feels fresh again. Other times I can see how much things are changing, and it feels more like an echo. An echo, she repeated softly. That's a good way to put it. Not gone, but not as immediate. Exactly. She transferred the vegetables to a baking dish, her movements precise but her voice hesitant. Do you think there might come a time when it fades completely? The hope in her question broke my heart a little. I don't know, Mom. I think maybe complete fading isn't the goal. Maybe it's more about integration, learning to hold the hurt alongside the love, the disappointment alongside the appreciation, seeing the full picture instead of just one part. She looked up at me then, eyes bright with unshed tears. When did you get so wise? I laughed softly. Therapy helps. You're seeing someone? A counselor? I nodded, surprised by her surprise. Since October, the university has a good program. Oh. She seemed to be processing this information, connecting it perhaps to her own recent entry into counseling studies. Is it helping? With the echo? It is, I confirmed. And with other things too. Figuring out who I am beyond the roles I've played. Learning to ask for what I need instead of just handling everything myself. That's good, she said, quietly. That's really good, Olivia. As we finished preparing the meal, I felt something shift between us. Not a complete transformation, but a deepening of the tentative new understanding we'd been building. For perhaps the first time, we were speaking not as mother and daughter locked in familiar patterns, but as two women acknowledging a shared, imperfect history while cautiously co-creating a different future. The day before I was scheduled to return to Northwestern, Emma asked if I'd help her with a photography project. It's about family narratives, she explained. leading me to the backyard where she'd set up a simple backdrop against the old oak tree. How they shape us, how we reshape them. She had me sit on a weathered bench, then took dozens of shots from different angles, standing above me, kneeling before me, circling to capture my profile against the late afternoon light. "What exactly are you trying to show?" I asked as she reviewed the images on her camera's display screen. She bit her lip, considering. How perspective changes everything, I guess. How the same person can look totally different depending on where you're standing. She showed me 2 photos side by side. In one, taken from above, I looked younger, almost vulnerable. In the other, shot from below, I appeared confident, commanding. "Both are true," she said, "but incomplete on their own." I studied my sister, this thoughtful young woman who had somehow, in the midst of our family's recalibration, developed an insight that had taken me years of struggle to achieve. "Emma," I said slowly, "I need to ask you something. And I want an honest answer." She lowered her camera, suddenly serious. "Okay. Are you really okay? With all the changes? With Mom and Dad's new approach? With everything?" She was quiet for a moment, considering the question with a maturity that still surprised me. "Mostly," she said finally. "Sometimes it's weird, like when Mom doesn't automatically jump in to help me with assignments, or when Dad expects me to manage my own schedule. There's this part of me that still wants to be taken care of, to be the special one who gets all the attention." Her honesty was disarming. "I get that," I told her. "It's hard to let go of roles we're used to, even when they're not healthy. But then there's this other part," she continued, "that feels so much lighter, like I'm finally allowed to be just Emma, not Emma who needs special handling." She looked directly at me. "I don't want to be resented, Liv. By you, or by anyone else. I want to be worthy of being loved." "Oh, Em." I stood and pulled her into a hug, camera pressed awkwardly between us. "You've always been worthy of being loved. That was never the issue." "I know," she mumbled against my shoulder. "But I want to be worthy of being respected, too. Of being seen as capable the way you are." I pulled back to look at her. This sister who had once been the unwitting beneficiary of our family's imbalance, and was now one of the primary architects of its reconstruction. "You're already there," I told her. "And you're doing it your own way, which is even better." That night, unable to sleep, I found myself drawn to the back porch, the same spot where my mother and I had sat in January, where the first tentative acknowledgement of our family's dysfunction had been voiced. The air was cool, but not cold, spring making its gradual approach even in Minnesota. I was surprised when the door opened behind me and my father stepped out, wrapped in his old flannel robe. "Mind some company?" he asked. I shook my head, making room on the step beside me. We sat in silence for a while, watching the moon cast silver light across the yard. "Your mother told me about your conversation yesterday.